and we have no electricity because there's no generators, so basically we're trying to keep the phones charged between anyway, whatever, guys, we'll keep going. Hello.
Hi.
Sorry it's so hot in here, but that's the way it's going to be.
That's okay.
Tell everybody your name.
Laurie.
Okay, Laurie, how many children have you got?
3.
How old are they?
They are now 13, 11, and 10.
13, 11, and 10. And what are they, girls, boys?
13-year-old boy, 11-year-old girl, and a 10-year-old boy.
Okay, right, we're going to go back and ask you this question that we're now asking everybody. When you were pregnant with your first child, could I have said, there goes an anti-vaxxer?
Yeah, you could have said that, but I probably would have been like, oh, they're crazy.
Wait, so you were an anti-vaxxer or you weren't?
No, I wasn't.
So you were not an anti-vaxxer?
No.
Okay, got it. Probably didn't phrase that question very well. Because they accuse us of being anti-vaxxers. But it's very important that they know that we were not, and we did vaccinate. We are ex-vaxxers. Well, I don't even know if you are. I don't know your story, but I presume you are. That's why you're sitting here.
Yeah.
So were you vaccinated while you were pregnant?
With my daughter, I was. I got a flu shot while I was pregnant with her.
And she's your youngest? Middle?
She is my middle.
Okay,
one. Yeah.
And what made you get that flu shot? What did they tell you that you thought that you needed to do that?
I was in the office and they told me, you're pregnant. It's really important. You need to protect yourself from the flu and go ahead and get the flu shot. And so I got it.
And how many weeks in did you get that?
I was probably about 5 or 6 months along at the time.
And was she born on time?
She was.
Okay, good. All right, so actually this story goes back to you. Let's talk about you first. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us what happened to you, what your experiences on being injured by vaccines.
So when I was 7 years old, I got a TPT vaccine. It was the last shot that you're supposed to get in that series at the time. It was the last one. And I remember my mother took me to the doctor, got the shot, and a couple of hours later we were back home. And once my brother and I were getting ready for bed, we grew up in a small apartment in New York City, so everything's really close. I remember my dad wasn't home, he worked nights, and my brother and I were wrestling as siblings do, and all of a sudden he had said that I started convulsing and my eyes rolled back until they were white. And my mom said she remembers hearing this high-pitched, sounded like a high-pitched cry. And she said it was a sound she's never heard before, and came running into the room, and she found me convulsing too.
At 7 years old?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I was rushed to the hospital after that, spent a few days in the hospital.
Do you have any memory of any of this?
I actually do. I actually do have memory of it. I have memory of waking up after the seizure was done. Just remember, my pajamas were wet, because of course I lost control of my bladder. I do remember being taken to the hospital, and I also remember my pediatrician coming in the next day, and she looked at my mom, threw down my chart, and she said, DPT shot, it happens sometimes. And just kind of hey, that's one of those things that just happen.
It's a wicked shot for sure, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Okay, they always like to tell us afterwards. So what was the result for you? What did that mean, your seizure? How did you progress after that? Did you get any more vaccines? What's the deal?
So after that, I guess because the way that my doctor phrased it to my mom, she never made a connection for us to not get any more vaccines. But that was really at that time, because it was the 80s, it was probably one of the last vaccines that I received as a child. So I didn't receive any more after that at that time. And I guess it wasn't immediately after, but I developed allergies, I developed asthma. I remember going out to eat Chinese food that I had eaten many times in the past, and I remember being taken to the hospital for an asthma attack because I had an allergy to the shrimp. I also remember at that time walking up the stairs in the school and my legs hurting. And I just remember having a lot of these symptoms that I never had before. And also what was interesting, there was a teacher. So when you go to elementary school, you have different teachers every year. And we had one science teacher that taught kinder through 6th grade. And I remember him telling my mom, maybe a few months after this reaction, he said, I don't know what's wrong with your daughter, but she's just not the same anymore. He said she used to be this real outgoing kid, and she used to be so much different. He said, and really on top of everything. He said, she's just, I don't know what's going on. He goes, but something has completely changed. And I guess my mother didn't know what to make of that, but it's interesting how a teacher who knew me since kindergarten, and this was about 3rd grade, he picked up on that I had changed.
And for you today, do you have any allergies, or is there any sort of effect from this vaccine?
I have autoimmune disease now that I've been diagnosed with.
And what are the things that happen to you with an autoimmune disease? What's your
so I just have a lot of fatigue. I just have a lot of brain fog. I have a lot of joint and muscle pain I experience. I'm just sensitive to a lot of different things. So it's definitely symptoms that have stayed with me for a while. Just have a lot of sleep issues.
All right, so you go ahead, get married, have children, and so you're pregnant with your first child. You did not get vaccinated while you were pregnant with your first child.
Correct.
What are the problems that you've seen with your first child, if any? Because you say 2 out of the 3 are more affected.
Yes.
So is your first child the one that's affected?
Yes.
Okay, talk to us about him.
So when I was pregnant with him, I didn't think anything really about the vaccines at all. I never was offered any vaccines while I was pregnant. I'm sure if I was offered them, I would have gotten them. He was born, had his Hep B shot in the hospital, and I really didn't think anything about that. But then when I went to take him in for his first set of vaccines, I knew it was going to include a DTaP. So I said right away, I thought about the reaction that I had as a child. So I asked my pediatrician, I said, well, this is what happened to me when I was 7 years old. So I'm concerned about that for him. And she said, well, they used to be cellular and now they're acellular, so you're fine. As if that was going to explain that. And the way she was saying it was, kids used to get seizures from that. They no longer do because it's acellular. And so you're fine. So you basically have nothing to worry about. And because I never did my own research, I never looked it up on my own, the answer sounded like it made sense. It sounded like it made a whole lot of sense to me. So I didn't question it. I got him vaccinated, and he didn't have a seizure. So I kind of thought, hey, we're in the clear, we're fine, because that was my concern. In my mind at that time, vaccines could cause a seizure, but not really anything else. I mean, that could be like, at the severe end of a reaction, but it wouldn't cause anything else. So he received his vaccinations. He would cry, he would be inconsolable, or sometimes he would just take this 5-6 hour nap where he just wasn't himself, and you just chalk it up to, he's fussy from, he got his shots, he's fussy. And that's what everybody around you would say, so you would go, okay, he's just fussy from it. He started to get sick very frequently. He was sick a total of 35 times his first 2 years of life. He had ear tubes by 9 months because he had about 8 ear infections by that time. So he was constantly on antibiotics. He was constantly sick with fevers, and he was constantly being vaccinated during those times. And, we saw subtle changes in his sleep patterns, but nothing that we connected at all. Then when he was 12 months, he got his 12-month vaccines, which included MMR. And exactly a week later, he had 106 fever. He was incredibly lethargic. He was inconsolable. They thought he had meningitis at the time because he was just so inconsolable. And he just wasn't eating. And he just was not himself. And we ended up in the emergency room twice. They couldn't figure out what was going on. We were at the pediatrician a couple of times. And, it's probably just a virus. They took labs. It's probably just a virus. And from that point forward, we definitely saw a huge increase in sleep troubles. We saw different behaviors. with him. He became very hyper after that, getting into a lot of things. And, at the time you just go, oh, well, he's a toddler now. He's a toddler. You just chalk this up to this 106 fever was just some illness that he had. He also ended up developing GI problems after that. And he had horrible diarrhea 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. That whenever he would have a bowel movement, he would just scream in pain because and his bottom was raw just because it was just bothering him so much.
Same story over and over and over again.
Yeah. And he also was just so different because I would put him down for a nap and it seemed like he would fall asleep for 20, 30 minutes and then wake up and he'd cry and cry and cry for the longest time. And I remember I would sit him on my lap, and I remember sitting him on my lap facing me one day, and I just remember just in frustration he's just crying and swinging and doing this kind of like I'm in pain, and that's what I see now. But that's just what he was doing. He just didn't seem happy at that time. So
did he go on and get a diagnosis of anything, or
not at that point? So at that point, a daycare provider said to me that she was concerned about some of his behaviors, and she said, I think seems like he has a mild speech delay. So we had early childhood intervention. They came in, they saw him, but we kept vaccinating, and when he was 4, we lost my nephew to the flu and an asthma attack.
And how old is your nephew?
He was 7 at the time.
You lost him to the flu?
Yes. And he had a flu shot, my nephew, but that's what he died from. It was the flu and an asthma attack. So having that happen with such a close family member, I said, oh, we probably should get a flu shot for the kids, because now I was afraid of that. And
you hadn't put together that maybe the flu shot, he'd had the flu shot and he died of flu.
Right.
Okay, carry on.
Right. Right. But my thinking was just, oh, we have to we should protect them, which I didn't normally always get the flu shot for I didn't normally get the flu shot for the kids. But so I went into my pediatrician, who was incredibly pro-vaccine. There was nothing that she would ever say, vaccines are only, they're only good and they're 100% good. That was just kind of her attitude. So I was a little bit hesitant about it, like, oh, should I get it? Oh, absolutely. You just lost a family member to this. You absolutely should. So went ahead and gave the flu shot to all 3 kids, and after that, that's when we saw a major reaction that we really couldn't deny.
In your oldest child?
In my oldest child. So after that, he started coming out of bed over his ears. He would put his hands over his eyes all the time. He lost eye contact. He lost play skills. He would just take a blanket and he would wrap himself tightly in it, and he would roll around on the floor like all day if I let him do that. That's what he would do. And he had good pretend play skills before that. He would take a baby doll and he would feed it a bottle, and he would do all kinds of pretend things, and he seemed to lose that type of play with this reaction that he had. And he became very... he seemed to develop a lot of intense fears. Like we had an indoor parking garage that we had gone to before, and this time when we went, I remember him covering his ears in it and one car had driven by, and you hear like this big swishing noise because it's an indoor parking garage. And when that happened, I remember that I had my younger 2 in the stroller, and he was walking with me, and he just became really just started melting down from that noise. And I remember he just went down my arms, and I remember having like scratch marks down my arms just from him being so fearful of that noise. And he never reacted that way prior to that. He also started stimming. That's something I'd never seen in him before. He just started this repetitive motion constantly that he was doing. I didn't even know what it was at the time. He also, I'm trying to think of what else at the time. We would go to indoor play places that he had gone to before, and he was completely comfortable playing there. He would get really excited about going there. And I remember we went to this one place. We were going to go in, and we were right outside, and I went to open the door, and he just would not go in. And he just started having a meltdown right outside, and just, he hit the floor and started hitting his head on the concrete because he just wouldn't go in. And these are places that used to make him happy, and he didn't want to go in.
Gut-wrenching for you as well.
Yeah, it was horrible to see him like that, because he just, I knew that he did not have that before. I mean, I knew we had some issues from the other reactions, and I knew we had some things going on, but it was nothing like that. As a matter of fact, I brought him back to the pediatrician, and I had said to her, I showed her what was going on, basically, and she said, well, he had some issues before. And I said, no. I said, he had some hyperactivity. He had some sleep issues. He was not like that. And when I pointed to him, he happened to be underneath a chair, his hands over his ears, his knees pulled up to his chest, and just sitting there. And I said, you have never seen my child like this before. And she couldn't deny that. She couldn't deny that, because, I mean, that's not what he looked like before. He did not look like that. So there's just a whole lot of things that we lost after that. And that's when we finally woke up. That's when we finally said, that's it. We are completely done.
Do you have an unvaccinated child? Or all your children vaccinated?
They are, but my youngest is my least vaccinated one, and he has the least amount of issues as well. So.
Well, isn't that a coincidence?
Yeah.
So, what other issues do your children have from vaccines? Tell me more about your children.
So, my daughter, when I was pregnant with my daughter, as I said, I did receive a flu vaccine when I was pregnant with her. And when she was born, she actually was, her personality, everything was great. Developmentally, she was fine. But she had a lot of skin rashes, and she had thrush for probably the first 6 months of her life. So definitely was fighting something there.
Who had the last vaccine? When did you stop? What was the last thing that happened?
After that flu shot.
So
after I
that
gave
flu
them
shot.
the flu shot.
So how many years have they been without vaccines, your babies?
So now, that was 2008, so almost 10 years now.
And how are they doing now? It makes a big difference when people stop vaccinating over time as they heal their children. We see, that's if they haven't gone too far with brain injury, we really do see parents light up and say, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, so they've definitely made a lot of progress. We've definitely done a lot of things to try and heal them, which, as you know, is just tremendous amount of work.
And money.
And the impact to your family is huge, because it impacts everyone, not just your children that are affected. And but they have made really good progress. And we've seen things that we never thought that we would see. So they still have a ways to go, but they definitely have made a lot of progress, for sure.
What is your advice to the young mum you used to be, that thinks that the white coat profession, you do not question them? What is your advice? They're about to take their children in for their vaccines.
So my advice is that if I could talk to myself when I was younger, is to not be so trusting of the medical professionals, because I've heard pediatricians that I've spoken to, physicians that I've spoken to will say the only thing that we're really taught in medical school about vaccinations is to give them. We're not really taught about how each ingredient reacts in the body. We're not really taught about the adverse reactions. So I put so much trust, because I thought, if I really like my doctor, I can completely trust them. And that's not the case. And I think that so many people put so much trust in their medical professionals, and it's good to bounce something off of them. It's good to say, what do you think about this? But I think it's so important to really read the research and to educate ourselves, because if I would have went digging, the information is there. The information about vaccines was there. And I put so much trust in my pediatrician when she said, oh, they're, it used to be cellular, now they're acellular, as if they don't cause, as if as if DTaP does not cause a seizure anymore. And it's interesting because my daughter had abnormal EEGs. That was one of the things that we struggled with her. And I remember one of the EEG techs one day said to me, she brought up something about vaccines and said, and this is when nobody was in the room, and she said to me, she said, I don't care what anybody says about those vaccines. She said, there's something to it, because she said, I have parents who come in here and their story is always the same. They were doing fine. They were doing fine yesterday, and I took them for their well visit, and now they can't stop seizing. And she said, so she goes, this is anecdotal evidence. She goes, but there's something to that. So, I mean, you just have people say that to you, and you realize they see things.
Interesting you should say that. I saw a couple of trolls on an earlier scope where they were saying there's no proof. You know what, to those people, this is we're not interested in scientific proof. We're not interested in what the dark side science says. This is proof, parent to parent. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Why are you sitting here? What is it you want to achieve? Do you want to these other people? What is it that you're here for? Because you don't have to be here.
Right. I think it's important for us to tell our stories. I think it's important for the public to hear just the amount of stories that are like mine, that I wish that I could say that my story was rare, but it's not. It's definitely not rare, and it's definitely something that I've heard after connecting with moms over the years, that, like you said, you hear the same stories over and over again. And what I want people to know is, like I said, don't put that much trust in your in your medical professionals. It's okay to have your doctor, but you really need to read the research on your own, because you're getting misinformed. We're not always getting the right information from our doctors. We'd like to believe that, but we're definitely not. And I want to see this madness end. I want to see it end, because I think that for so much that's out there right now, and to see the amount of names on this bus right now, it's just so heartbreaking to see this go on and to see it continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the sad reality of this situation is a lot of money involved in the murder and brain damaging of our children. And I think, as people say, follow the money trail. Anything else you want to add to your story? Is there anything else you want to tell people? You've told your story so amazingly. You're getting a lot of love, a lot of hearts.
Well, I mean, I guess, my daughter had developed a similar to my son, and I think that, just to add that, as much as these reactions were happening, and I say, I mean, I look back now, and, when I got our records from the pediatrician, and I realized that my daughter's reaction and my son's reaction were exactly the same. Their blood work was even the same. And I look at it and I go, how could I have not known? There's a part of me that feels so stupid telling my story. How could I have not known? How could I? And like I said, I mean, your doctors will never steer you in that direction. They'll never say, well, perhaps there's something going on here. You ask them, is it okay to vaccinate my child while they're on antibiotics and while they have 102 fever? Oh, sure, it's fine. And, you put that trust in. But when I look back on everything, I say, how could I have not seen it? So I want people to really wake up to the reality of what's going on, and to really look at the facts for themselves. And one of the biggest things that I've always have wished that I have done, and I've been learning to do more, is listen to my gut as a mom. Because when your gut tells you something, if your gut tells you there's something off with your child, if your gut tells you to do something or not to do something for your child, especially when it comes to a medical procedure, listen to your gut. definitely.
Okay, wonderful. You're an amazing person.
Thank you.
And people love you. Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you so much.
Is your name on the bus? Your name? You're the injured.
Mine is not.
Okay.
No, I should go write it,
you
though.
You should. In fact, you've just reminded me of that. Okay, guys, we're going to go. We got another story. We still are waiting for RV Mechanic number 2. Keep praying, big peeps. Yes. There's obviously a little issue here. Okay. Yes. We're coming off social media and